Ladies and gentlemen.
You want experience during your football season? Well, buckle up, sweet cheeks.
That's all we need.
We've got all the experience in the world. This is I Want Your Flex with Dan Beyer and Mike Harmon. Mike and Dan break down everything you need to set your lineups. From position rankings to starts and sits, the guys help you make those hard decisions. And now, let's get your flex on. Here's Dan Beyer and Mike Harmon.
The wild cards are in the books. The super wild cards in the books. Get Mike on Twitter at SwollenDome. I'm at Dan Beyer on Fox. We look ahead to the 4 divisional playoff games. Doubleheader on Saturday, doubleheader on Sunday. But, Mike, before we get to all that, we have to address the news that came out of Philadelphia on Monday. There is going to be a change at the head coach position as Doug Pederson is out, making now 7 vacancies in the National Football League at the time of this recording. The Doug Pederson one, I don't want to say it came out of left field because it didn't, because there had been talks some rumblings over the last month or so that maybe Doug Pederson could be in trouble. But once Jalen Hurts kind of took over the starting job, you thought, all right, Doug Pederson's going to be able to stick around and last till next season. The vision was not shared the vision that Jeffrey Lurie had was not shared by Doug Pederson, so Lurie ends up making a change. Doug Pederson out after 5 seasons.
Yeah, the curiosity, right? Talking about it after the loss to Washington. We talked about it last week, all the different conspiracy theories of what it all meant and how it all went down. And, you know, there's still a lot that I'd love to see sorted out. And these discussions with Jeffrey Lurie, certainly there's so many permutations. He says emphatically, well, it's not about Wentz. Okay. There's reports that Pederson didn't like being told what to do. Okay. Theories about the locker room being lost after that Week 17 and the benching of Hurts. And then you take what you will from Jason Kelsey's response, right? He's one of the team leaders. Obviously disappointed, but said he had talked to Doug during the, as he called it. I don't call him Doug. I don't know Doug Pederson. But he, said, all right, is he going in? And then he talked up Nate Sudfeld. So it was more about Sudfeld, but kind of understanding, all right, he'd worked hard, give him the evaluation period, as it were, but everybody else was going to play. So, did he really lose the locker room? Was this a thing with Lurie? Even Lurie's statement made no sense, Dan. Does he deserve to be fired? No. And then he continues on and said, but now we've got to separate. It's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
There seems to be a lot there, and I know there are Eagles fans that point to the Jalen Reagor draft pick last year that they weren't necessarily thrilled with. I mean, listen, he was also hurt.
He got hurt all year.
You can't completely hold that against him. But the long term versus the short term, there's the Carson Wentz sort of deal. I do think that Doug Pederson doesn't like being told what to do. I thought maybe he would attach his wagon to Jalen Hurts and ride that into next season, and that didn't happen. Now the question becomes, as you look at the Eagles, and listen, there aren't many fantasy options out there. There's Miles Sanders. Maybe people have him as a holdover league. But other than that, there's really not any value in Philadelphia that you would hold. So we can hold our judgment to how that's going to affect the Eagles when it comes to fantasy in 2021. But when you are looking for a head coach, the question now is, do you go for the head coach for your organization? Do you go for a head coach that shares the same vision that Jeffrey Lurie has, that Howie Roseman has? Or do you find a head coach that is going to try to make Jalen Hurts your franchise quarterback? And I think that all of those are legitimate questions. And the last one that I ask, I think is actually the biggest one of all, is what do you do with Jalen Hurts and that quarterback position? Do you bring in a head coach that's going to cater to what Jalen Hurts does? Are they going to want to bring in their own stuff and blend with Jalen Hurts' game? But that is a unique situation in Philadelphia that I don't think you even get in the other 6 openings. I mean, Houston, who knows what's going to happen, but we just aren't sold on Jalen Hurts as a starting quarterback for a franchise for the next 10 years. So now you kind of got to make a decision in Philadelphia on how you're going to develop that relationship, because I don't know which way you go with Jalen Hurts. Looked great in his little opportunities that he had.
Sure.
But is it enough to cash in to bring in a head coach that you want to put all of your eggs in that basket? I wish I had the answer, and maybe because I don't have the answer, maybe I know the answer.
Well,
you know what I mean?
I roll it up to this, Dan, it's how many people were looking to kick Tua Tagovailoa to the curb because of what happened and how Flores managed things down the stretch. No regular offseason, no offseason workouts, no preseason games.
Yeah.
What were you expecting, right? Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow, when he was still being able to be upright before he took the 900th hit in that half a season that he played. I mean, those guys were freaks in terms of how this is supposed to go, becoming a quarterback in the National Football League. It's not supposed to be that seamless that you look like you belong. And so for Tua and for Jalen Hurts, the answer is I don't know. You know, I joked last week on the podcast, Miami should do the reverse draft day move, and all of a sudden, it's like I spoke that into existence. Because all of a sudden, that started to be, just send him there and get all the picks back. I'm like, whoa, I have magnificent powers that I've never thought. I've been watching way too much Harry Potter, and now I have some of that stuff kind of soaking into me, or the Marvel Universe, pick your, other world of choice. But the answer is for those two guys, I don't know what they are at this point. You're right, it's a little bit of wishing and hoping. And for Jeffrey Lurie, he's got a lot of other problems. You talk about building a roster. Is Rager going to be the guy? Right? Yeah. Can he stay healthy? You brought back Deshaun Jackson, for crying out loud, thinking he was going to be a high-impact player.
Sure. You brought back Jason Peters to end up being your tackle, then guard, then tackle again.
Right, but you duct tape and bandaged him as much as you could until he couldn't take anymore. Look at Roseman. That's the guy you should be looking at. It's like, in terms of building a roster, they had a lot of bad breaks. A lot of guys got hurt. But the reality is you came in with a lot of questions outside of Miles Sanders and your tight ends, if they could stay healthy, as to who was actually going to be a playmaker for Carson Wentz.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky situation right now. I mean, one of the we'll leave it with this as you're trying to determine, is Jalen Hurts the answer for the future? I would say that if I had to give an answer right now, no, that would be the answer. I liked what I saw in spots, but then you also saw what he did in Week 17, and to the point of when Sudfeld came in, was it really that much of a downgrade from what Hurts was playing in that game? It's just a one-off sort of deal. There's just going to be a lot of questions to be answered in Philadelphia.
People seem to forget that he completed only a third of his passes.
Sure.
The fact that he ran 2 touchdowns in is fine. You're not paying him. Look, that's got to be part of the game. And I make this argument with Lamar Jackson. We made it for years with Cam Newton. That's going to be part of the game. You got to see more consistency in the other part. And part of it is, did you have the proper weapons to really attack a pretty good Washington D? No. But there were times that he came up smallish. So for me, it's all right, I'd love to see it take a shot with whomever this next coach is. I also want to know how Roseman gets to hire his 4th coach. Riddle me that, Batman.
Sure. Well, and the Eagles aren't in a situation where they have the talent level of Baltimore.
No.
And I don't know how much I want my quarterback running around getting murdered by defenses when you're only winning, 4 games a year. It's another question Philadelphia's going to have to answer.
That's the other part, yeah.
We'll leave Philadelphia for another day, or at least more on the conversation. Let's look ahead to the divisional playoffs that come up. Game number 1, the Rams, fresh off their win in Seattle where they stymied the Seahawks. And I thought I thought maybe we should look back at Wild Card Weekend. I said, no, let's look ahead. Let's look ahead to what we have. If you want to hear my thoughts,
the good avoidance of the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, if you want to hear my thoughts on the Seahawks, just go to foxsportsradio.com or check out my Twitter handle at Dan Beyer on Fox. That's where you can find me. And I did a little bit on the Sunday show with George Reister, so you can get my thoughts on that. But we have to focus on the Rams because the Rams did run the football with a healthy Cam Akers. Maybe not 100% healthy Cam Akers, but he was able to do damage against a Seahawks defense. So the Seahawks are going home, and the Rams now with a banged-up Jared Goff as their starting quarterback, a banged-up Aaron Donald on the defensive line. You now got to go to Green Bay and take on Aaron Rodgers and the Packers in what should be a chilly afternoon in Green Bay, as it always is in mid-January. I think it's a really, really tough spot for the Rams. I think that it's a really, really tough spot for everybody on that side, fantasy-wise, I like Green Bay, and I like Green Bay big in this scenario. I think that the Rams maxed out of their playoff push with what they did in Seattle, and I just don't see it traveling to Green Bay.
Familiarity, we talked about it last week, Dan, leading up to the game between the Rams and Seahawks. Familiarity, the fact that McVay has done very well in his career against Pete Carroll. If we were to do another coaching jag, I'd be asking you about changes needed, if any, in Seattle with regard to philosophy and others. They say they're going to run the ball.
Listen to my rant. It's 4 minutes. Exactly. That's what it's all about. It's the whole thing.
Let Russ cook anymore. Anyway.
If you want to let Russ cook, give him the frick. I almost swore.
Yeah!
If you're going to let Russ cook, give him an offensive line that blocks for him, and don't just give him, DK Metcalf running down the field hoping that, take the lid off, and, you got to make up your mind one way or the other.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I digress.
No, that was good. I knew you got to let it out. I mean, you got to let it out, Dan, and if not, to me, I'm hateable all over the place. That if you can't yell at me, it's just bottles up and it eats you up inside. Have you not listened to Don Henley? That was all he ever sang about. The Rams, I think, have maxed. That was their win. You talk about Aaron Donald being banged up, rib cartilage. Cooper Kupp is banged up. Jared Goff, it's a small sample size, but he's been absolutely awful whenever it's not a Southern California kind of weather situation.
Yeah.
And you talk about going in and Green Bay, while they're not a team that had dominated in terms of a sack total, you'll be able to get out. I want to give Andrew Whitworth all the credit in the world for getting back out there. Big theme across Wild Card Weekend was guys either coming back or being inserted in random spots and dominating and holding up on the offensive line, and they did a great job. But with Jared, I don't trust Jared Goff. That's what it comes down to. When it's all said and done in this big spinning wheel, we talked a lot about Philadelphia. Jared Goff's another guy. Got a huge check, begrudge no man his money, but I don't think he's a guy that's going to make a play. And he was serviceable against Seattle. It was all the Cam Akers show and that defense that made it hum. That's the only hope they have, is if somehow you can get a little bit of the run game and don't get behind. You get behind early, you're screwed. Right, You're not coming back. If Aaron Rodgers has any success early, and people always, you can run on the Packers. Packers were still tied for 13th in run defense, right? Why? Because they're going to outscore you, and you're going to have to abandon it.
And listen, the Rams, I think the Devontae Adams Jalen Ramsey matchup is obviously going to be amazing.
Sure, absolutely.
But what it also tells me, and it's not that the Rams, because the Rams are really good all around on defense, whether it's getting after the quarterback, whether it's the other pieces in their secondary, as we saw them wreak havoc on Seattle, just tells me that Aaron Rodgers is going to need to rely a little bit more on Aaron Jones. But also you're going to see Marquez Valdes-Scantling. You're going to see some Tunyon. You're going to see all of that in the mix, I think, on Saturday. And so, if you're playing daily fantasy where Devontae Adams is probably your highest priced wide receiver, that may not be the smartest of plays considering what they're going up against. But on the flip side of that coin, Mike, is you can get a lot of value with the other guys that may put up comparable numbers if you wanted to go to a Green Bay pass catcher.
Yeah, I think that's exactly. I think MVS is the guy I'd be looking for, right? Safety shading towards wherever Devontae Adams is running. Devontae, remember to spell his name right, or spell it like Devontae Smith, he said, after the national title game. But, that's where you break it down. And obviously Jalen Ramsey most times can handle guys one-on-one, which is a great advantage to have. Just a question here when you've got a quarterback that I think can deliver like Rodgers, and I'm not doing this to kiss up to lead to lap, and normally I'm not too effusive with the praise of Aaron Rodgers. Why? Because everybody else lines up at the altar to do it. So I usually just, he's great. I'm tired of looking at him. And Brett Favre in my division for all these years as a Chicago boy. But, yeah, the secondary receivers, Tunyon for tight ends is always a play. You're going to have red zone opportunities. That's really what it comes down to. Get the little pop out and pop over kind of quick little 3-yard touchdowns. You might be looking at the rest of the band of merriment for $1,200 or whatever as well, and roll the dice, in one of those $1 kind of take all kind of scenarios, because I think everybody's going to get fed.
Yeah, I think when you look at the other guys outside of Adams in this game, and even on the Rams side of things, if you looked at Robert Woods, if you looked at Cooper Kupp, it's just the value of the value of Robert Woods with the health of Jared Goff to me just isn't it. They don't balance out. It's not worth playing Robert Woods for how much you would probably have to pay for him, considering that you have Jared Goff at quarterback. Maybe you can get Cooper Kupp a little bit cheaper, but I would rather take my chances on MVS catching a 60-yard touchdown pass than take my chances on Jared Goff dealing with a thumb injury, dealing with a cold, dealing with their situation. So there's just not much with the Rams that I'm a big fan of when it comes to on Saturday in fantasy and in just the regular game.
Yeah, I mean, based on the algorithms, maybe Cam Akers is cheap enough at the running back position, right? And when you look at the receivers, like for Robert Woods, are you going to bank that he scores on an end around or that he throws a touchdown pass? No, you're not. And the gadgetry will be on display in this one. There's no question, because they're going to need to find points and find plays, because Jared Goff didn't look comfortable. The ball never has been pretty, and it sure as hell isn't pretty when he's running around with a cast on.
That is game 1 on Saturday. Game 2 ends up being the Ravens at Buffalo after the Ravens won in Tennessee and the Bills held off the Colts in Buffalo in their wild card game. I want to start on the Ravens side of things because just Lamar Jackson was one of the big stories coming out, but 136 yards, the big touchdown run, threw for 179 of those, with all but 70 of those going to Marquis Brown. I like Marquis Brown again. I actually like Lamar Jackson again. I'll tell you who else I like, even though he did get in the end zone on Sunday, but was not a huge factor. J.K. Dobbins. I think that this Ravens-Bills game is going to be a great game. I don't think it's going to play out. I don't think Buffalo is going to do what Tennessee did and just try to shut everything down with with guys in the box. So I think that J.K. Dobbins can end up maybe getting a little bit better game. But I like Marquise Brown again. I like some of the targets that Baltimore has.
Yeah, I think when you look at this one, I mean, Buffalo's D can be had, right? That's the one thing. And we thought Tennessee's could coming into that one. It didn't play out as a monster game. I know Vrabel was complaining about calls. Like, never mind that his guy got away with a massive push-off for the touchdown. Early.
I thought the worst 2 calls went against Baltimore.
Right.
Right?
But
the pick play.
It's all about beauty is in the eye of the beholder, as they say. But it's one of those games that I think we're going to see some points. I think, we know with Lamar Jackson, and I got criticized a lot for it when Coach Harbaugh had said it, he's going to keep running a lot, and that was a year ago. Right before last season started, and everybody was up in arms saying, you're going to shorten his career. What are you doing? Like, if you get 10 good years of the guy instead of 12, and it makes him the most effective player he can be, what are you losing? So if he can carry the ball and that adds another element, and you saw that 48-yard touchdown run, I mean, he just went into another gear. There was no catching him. So he's just fun to watch. I equated him to Cam on the show with Jason Smith of the same criticism. It's like it may not be what you like aesthetically, but it works, right? Because Cam carried the ball 100 times a year, and everybody hated it. And it's like, if it wins, yes, his body will probably break down a little bit earlier.
Have we been doing too many shows together? Because I thought I had the Cam one. Yeah, but maybe we all have the Cam one. Because I thought the same thing.
I think it's you and I together is really what it comes down to.
I don't need 16 years. Give me 8 good ones.
Right. No, if that's going to shorten his career, like, he knows what he buys in for. He knows what his strengths are. And if it's going to help us win games now and win MVPs, so be it. And so against Buffalo, the over-under in this game is sitting at 50. You'll have a little bit of Bills Mafia up in there, right? But when it comes down to it, this is one I think can open up. You know I love J.K. Dobbins and have all your Gus Edwards will get his requisite 8 to 10 touches, I think, in this one because they want to keep Josh Allen and company off the field if they can, right? Yeah, keep that defense fresh.
They held the ball for 33-plus against Tennessee. So they kept the Titans off the field. Derrick Henry was shut down. Now, the running game in Buffalo obviously isn't the running game in Tennessee, and now the running game in Buffalo is even less than it was a week ago because Zach Moss is going to be out of this game and going to be out of the playoffs because of the ankle injury he suffered. And so what that tells me, and I think that tells most people, it's not that Baltimore is going to completely shut down the Buffalo run. It's just that now you have more to focus on trying to slow down Josh Allen. And that's where your focus ends up being. I don't think you're going to see the rushing numbers that you normally see from Josh Allen in this game against Baltimore. I think that he is their sole key being of the Ravens defense is Josh Allen. Josh Allen may end up leading the Bills in rushing in this contest, but it's not going to be for the 50 to 60 yards that he had against the Colts. I think that Baltimore zeroes in on Josh Allen and says, all right, if you're going to beat us, beat us with your arm, because I just don't think it's going to be with his legs.
Yeah, this is one, I think the road ends here. As much as I loved him for the MVP and been banging the drum, I also picked Baltimore to get to the Super Bowl. So before the season, and you can't change your picks if your teams are still alive. So looking at...
I did. Okay. That's all right.
Yeah, I just felt it. I had to stick with what it was, especially since they're also surging. So there was no reason to jump off the wagon necessarily. For the Bills, Stephon Diggs will get his numbers, no question. Cole Beasley scraping across. I don't think that the Ravens can shut them down altogether. But to your point, if Allen's not making big plays with his legs, I'm curious to see, if you get a little bit of a grind down like you did during the one stretch of the season where things turned away, right? Because Devin Singletary is a good receiver. In between the tackles, that generally fails.
Well, I just go back to the Browns game that the Ravens won in that shootout. That I don't know if it sparked their season. I don't know what it necessarily was, but it was a great win for them to go into Cleveland to win 47-42. And you say, well, that's a Ravens defense that gave up 42 points. And we had been hearing some bad stuff about the Ravens defense and over the last few weeks or so, but we saw what it can do in Tennessee. And the other thing about the game against Cleveland is at least Cleveland had the threat of the run. Like, you want to stop Nick Chubb. You want to stop Kareem Hunt. That's what you want to do. And they kind of got caught up in a game where nobody was stopping anybody. And you're not going to get that with Buffalo with their running game. You don't have to worry about Devin Singletary going off for $120. The Bills being one-dimensional worries me. If I think Stephon Diggs could still get his. I think Cole Beasley's a good daily fantasy play, and especially for the amount that you could get him for. And if Josh Allen's being pressured, then you can maybe look for Cole Beasley to be there. But yeah, I do find it's going to be, it'll be tough sledding for the Buffalo Bills on. No pun intended, if there's going to be weather in Buffalo on Saturday. But, yeah, I just think their one-dimensional nature makes them a little bit more difficult. I would tend to actually want to play more Ravens in this game than I would to want to play more Bills in this game.
Yeah, Dobbins and Andrews, low-cost Gus Edwards hoping for a goal line look. Lamar Jackson, because will make plays with his legs. I mean, Gabriel Davis is interesting just as he'll have man coverage, right, as he always does. Can he make a play? But T.J. Yeldon and Tywan Jones aren't making me fearful of that running attack as they step up with Zach Moss. It's too bad because I like the way that backfield had come into play. The last couple weeks, you saw more assertiveness from Zach Moss and becoming a bigger part of the offense, trying to get some balance and set up some play action. So with that lost, a little reticent to get too far behind Buffalo here.
Browns-Chiefs will be game 1 on Sunday. Cleveland coming off their big win against Pittsburgh. Chiefs obviously with that first-round bye with the first overall seed. I like a lot of what you could play in Kansas City, even though we think that the Browns should be back to full strength with any COVID situations. Patrick Mahomes, obviously a play. Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, all going to be guys. But if you're going to spend money, those would be the guys in my mind, Mike, that I would be looking at. I think the Browns won their Super Bowl on Sunday night. I think that it's difficult to carry over. They do get a full week, but you're on the road again. I think it's going to be difficult for Cleveland. I think Andy Reid off a bye, throw that into there.
Sure.
The ability for Cleveland to win the game, let alone just going up against the Kansas City Chiefs at any time, I think it's going to be very difficult for Cleveland. So I like a lot of Chiefs as your plays coming up on Sunday.
Yeah, as we talk about familiarity going back to what the Rams were able to accomplish wild card week. Same thing, the Browns having just played the Steelers. The fact that they didn't practice, that they didn't have Stefanski on the sideline, it didn't matter, right? I mean, they knew, and they came out like a house of fire. Now, it helped that Pouncey couldn't get a snap down in the open of that game. But to your point, I don't know how you match the intensity, right? How many times in a big event in your life do you say, well, I accomplished it? It's like, no, you still have work to do. Like, just because you finished that project, that next one has been sitting in the inbox waiting to go, and this is it. You mentioned guys getting healthy. Still won't have Olivier Vernon, unfortunately, so you don't get that pass rusher back. An admirable job by the Cleveland offensive line against Pittsburgh. Blake Hance from Northwestern that had to, met Baker Mayfield right before the game, ends up going in and helping to keep a clean pocket. So, I had to get the Northwestern guy in, but just showing what it is. So Bitonio will be back. Should help. KC's a top 10 D though. Can you slow them down? Right, for Cleveland, the run game, you're going to have to pay too much money, no matter what the algorithm is tweaked to be. I think for the output of Chubb. Kareem Hunt's a play, I think, because he's more in the passing game. And certainly Jarvis Landry because he finds space. And he'll probably throw a couple times. You want to talk about gadgetry? Cleveland's going to have to pull out all the stops for this one.
Yeah, and another name, and we've mentioned him a few times on the podcast, I think Rashard Higgins could give you value, maybe even in garbage time for Cleveland. Only had 2 catches, did have 7 targets in the game against Pittsburgh. So the opportunities were there. It's just the output was not there. And I think that could improve. But I think if it does improve, it's going to be in a losing effort.
Yeah, since I didn't get to yell about it on Monday night because we had the national title game going on while I was talking with Smith, why the hell did Pittsburgh punt when they were getting back into the game on 4th and 1? Like, Mike Tomlin can explain away a lot of things to me, and I'm going to say, all right, you've been successful, a long time, coach. I'm there. But that punt, maybe not as bad as Mike Vrabel's, but damn close.
Yeah. The Vrabel one with your defense, where you were on the field, 10 minutes left in the game, I think that one was worse to me, especially with who you have in the backfield as well. I mean,
barely fell forward on the weekend here, Dan. How about that?
Yeah. No, it was, but still, like in that situation, you're saying to yourself, okay, we can get this.
Got to dance with who brung you, right?
Yeah.
If he's worth anything, he fights his way for a first down.
Sure. And even if Tannehill wants to keep it, we've seen his mobility, so you can use that. I think that was worse than what Tomlin did. But
for a half, you know what, Dan? I was thinking my beloved Chicago Bears were not the worst story of Wild Card Weekend. Now, obviously, there's a lot that falls out in Pittsburgh, and we'll see what happens with their decisions for 2021. But the fact that they showed any fight at all kind of screwed me over.
Well, I was going to say that the Seahawks playing on Saturday actually covered up a lot of their wounds. So that was good to not have to deal with as much on a Monday. But there was plenty there as well. The game on Saturday that probably got the most hype was the Washington-Tampa game, just because of Taylor Heineke and his play for Washington. But the Washington football team is home for the rest of the season after being eliminated by the Buccaneers. And I think Ravens-Bills is going to be a good one, but I think Bucs-Saints has the opportunity to be the game of the day, not only with the headlining of the quarterbacks, but it's so difficult for me to see Tom Brady to be beaten 3 times by the same team, and the New Orleans Saints have an opportunity to do it, Mike. And not only could they do it on Sunday, it would be on the biggest TV windows, because it was in week 1, remember, in New Orleans when the season started. It was the national Fox game. Then the return affair where the Saints just annihilated Tampa was on Sunday Night Football. Now you put them in the last window of the divisional playoffs. Man, it's really tough for me. And you talked about keeping your picks and sticking with your picks. I had Tampa and the Steelers in my preseason picks. Mm-hmm. I moved off of that, went Bills Saints. But I really think that Tampa has a chance. And I don't know how they're going to do it. I have an idea. I think I see a path for them. But I think just more of anything, I just don't see Tom Brady being beaten 3 times by the same team.
Well, a couple of things, as we've talked on the podcast all year long, talking about from the fantasy side of things, they didn't play as a full unit. Everybody talks about the Saints, right? That's the hot topic for this week. Look, they finally got Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara back. Look, Michael Thomas got slimed early in the game. All of those things. I just wanted to see the reaction about slime. All of those things came together. The Buccaneers were the same thing, right? Evans was out of the lineup. Godwin was out of the lineup. Rob Gronkowski was still in Cabo shape.
Yeah.
Antonio Brown didn't join the team till mid-season, right? So, they're finally just rounding into form. Now, they lose Alex Kappa, the right guard, has a fractured ankle. Right when the offensive line seemed to have gelled as well. It seemed, to me, on some level, Dan, it reminded me of how Seattle's offensive line worked for a number of years, where it seemed like for the first half it was, all right, what's our 5 going to end up? How are we doing this? And then they'd start rolling towards the end of the year. That's kind of what I thought watching Tampa. And obviously they missed Ronald Jones this past week, but Leonard Fournette stepped in. I picked Tampa before the season. I got no reason to dive off them now, and certainly not in the 3rd times the charm game with all the money on the line.
Well, we know it's going to be difficult for the Saints to run on Tampa. We assume, because the second meeting, there were just 4 run attempts. So I think that changes. And even though Ronald Jones' status is up in the air, according to Bruce Arians, they're going to still run the ball, and it would be Keyshawn Vaughn or, as you mentioned, Leonard Fournette doing that. So Tampa is going to do that. I just think that the Saints could have some difficulty just because of just how good the Bucs are in stopping the run. And so you're going to maybe have to see a true Brady versus Brees showdown through the air. And I actually think Brady has the advantage. I thought Brady looked really good. His numbers wouldn't necessarily reflect it. Chris Godwin didn't help him a lot on Saturday.
No, he did not. He would have been over 500 yards if that guy catch a ball.
He had 4 drops in that game. Yeah. So when you take that into account, I picked the Saints. As I said, I picked them to go to the Super Bowl. I picked them to win in the Super Bowl at the start of the playoffs. But now with this matchup here of just sitting there looking at it, I don't know. There's just something telling me about Tampa in this scenario. And so with saying all of this stuff as we're talking about it, I like the plays of the Tampa receivers. Cameron Brate was probably the second best Buccaneer on Saturday, to be honest. So you could get him cheap if you wanted on a daily situation. If you're going with the Saints, go with the pass catchers, because you're probably not going to get the value you want with Kamara, Latavius Murray dinged up. So that's where I find value in this game if you're playing daily fantasy for our final playoff game of divisional playoff weekend.
Yeah, I would agree. I think maybe a little Jared Cook activity as well, red zone target. We got some injury notes that will follow over the course of the week. For Tampa, they should get Shaq Barrett and Devin White back. Right, when folks were commenting on the defense against Taylor Heineke, it's like two of their best players aren't there. Let me wave my hand and remind you of that. So they'll be back. And you talk about the run. Trey Hendrickson didn't play against the Bears. He's got a neck injury. He may not be back for this one. So you've still got some swirling around. Emmanuel Sanders is the guy I keep looking at. He wasn't as big a factor in the game against Chicago as I would have anticipated. But you saw Drew Brees going to work as he always does, because that's the other part of this. The Bears, even without Roquan Smith, and it's not excuse-making, they gave up 21 points.
Yeah.
Right? Without one of your best defensive playmakers, overall, bend, don't break kind of situation. Yes, you still lose 21-9, but you didn't get you got dominated in a lot of the box score stuff, but the score at the end, yes, I know the final touchdown doesn't much matter, but the fact that you only gave up 21 points is still something to hang a star on, I think, a little bit. The curiosity for me, though, is Deontay Harris, right? 7 catches, 7 targets, 83 yards. Whether that's an outlier or whether that's a guy that we can get at a bargain basement if this thing should open up, Dan.
I completely whiffed on Emmanuel Sanders. I actually thought he was going to have a day, and he did not. Even if he had a chance of leaving the end zone at one point, and that really wouldn't even have saved the day for 2 catches for 3 yards. That was.
But if he'd gotten in, look, that's a saver, right? It gets you to 10 points, and you could say, all right, not a home run, but you at least hit a double. They've got a 52 over-under on this one.
I think I agree with the bounce back of Emmanuel Sanders. I'm gonna still ride with it after how bad it was last week. But that's gonna be out of the 4. Ravens Bills I would put second. I'm interested in Browns Chiefs third. Rams Packers probably the least game that I am interested in this week. That will probably end up being the best game, just like we thought Bucks Washington was going to be a who cares, and it was anything.
Do you think
but.
that last touchdown for Washington should have counted? I thought it came off his hands. Back of the end zone. Spirit versus letter of the law. I had several tweets telling me what was wrong with America based on just before the replays start. I'm like, did he bobble that? I was like, no, you're a jerk. You're the worst. I'm like, wow. And then, some had some political commentary to throw in that I left out.
Did it separate the from the body? That was the whole.
Right? Did his hands come off the ball? Did you have the conclusive angle? Either way, hell of an effort by Taylor Heineke. But to your point, yeah, I think I would rank him that way. And it's it's the playoffs. This is where heroes and legends are made. And anybody that wanted to spit on the would-be grave sites of Tom Brady or Drew Brees, they've already written their 2,000 words. They just need to add the stats.
Speaking of rankings, we've been wrapping up these playoff editions of I Want Your Flex, counting down our favorite stat lines of this season. We gave you the Darren Waller 200-yard game and the Stephen Gostkowski 4-miss kick game that still included a game winner. Mike, you got 8-7 this week. What do you got for our favorite stat lines of the 2020 NFL fantasy season?
Well, it's 2 guys that you drafted pretty early. One is a guy that you just want to give a hug because you never really got to see it again. And I'm going to look in Cincinnati. No, it's not Joe Burrow. It is Joe Mixon. 25 carries, 151 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then 6 catches, 30 yards, and a score. Week 4 against Jacksonville, a 33-25 thriller. He played only 2 more games before being lost for the year.
I was so high on Joe Mixon coming into 2020.
I think I ranked him 5th in the running backs.
Yeah, I was so high on him and Kenyon Drake. Yeah. I was so high on those 2 guys. And Mixon had a worse year than Drake did. Drake, I consider Drake a fantasy disappointment. But what could have been. I wonder if Joe Mixon will be the guy who people feel snake bitten by, or if he will be the under-the-radar guy in 2021.
If Joe Burrow is healthy, he'll be the under-the-radar guy. I think folks will come back for another bite of the apple if Burrow is cleared for week 1. Because you saw what T. Higgins could be
Yeah.
With he and Tyler Boyd, you got a nice base. So I think Joe Mixon becomes a guy that becomes the underrated, but people will try to get him at a bargain. But given the dual abilities, the number of targets, right, 2 of his last 3 games, 6 and 8 targets, you circle that and say, all right, there's value here. So he won't drift too far.
Who else, or what was the other fantasy ranking coming in at number 7 for our favorite stat lines of 2020?
Well, because I want to tell people how much I loved Josh Allen again for the regular season. It's nothing personal in the playoffs. I just have to stick with the pick that I made. But in Week 16 against New England, and whenever you go against New England, it's the wringing of the hands of they can take away your best player. Not this year. 9 catches, 145 yards, 3 scores in championship week to seal the deal for a lot of folks. So we'll celebrate Stephon Diggs because, you have all the arguments of can a receiver help make a team? Sure. Look what Josh Allen, even all the offseason work and everything else, yes, he improved. But having a number 1 that can go get it, even if you put a box and 1 on him, college basketball style, that helps a lot of ills.
There it is. So you've got 8 and 7 for our fantasy stat line countdown for the 2020 season. 6 and 5 will be brought to you at the next podcast, which will drop in a week. So we're only doing the 1 podcast this week, but we'll have the recap of the divisional playoffs and then look ahead to championship weekend. Should be fun, Mike. Only 7 more football games to go in the NFL season. And heck, just for our 2020/21 football season, now that college football is done with, we've got 7 more in the NFL to go, so we need to enjoy each and every one of them.
Would you like to give 30 seconds on the championship game?
I can give you 2 words on the championship game, but I just don't want to, I want to keep it clean.
You want to keep from getting the explicit tag. I get that.
Congratulations to Alabama, who I think showed they were the best team in college football.
Yeah, it's very magnanimous and and loving of you there, Dan. No, the fact that we only have 7 left. Look, there's 2 things to say about it, right? I'm sad because it means there's just a couple of weeks, and then pitchers and catchers will report. We'll get deeper into the throes of the NBA and NHL come back, and that's all fine. But it's also a recognition of, even though this road was not straight by any way, shape, or form, the fact that we're this close to celebrating a Super Bowl week in Tampa and a huge game, and look at the cast of characters. You either have youth being served with all the young guys that are part of this, or a couple of the veterans, whether it's Rodgers, Brees, or Brady. I mean, it's pretty incredible finale, and the fact that we've gotten through there with some hiccups, but to make it through the season, still pretty impressive.
I'm counting it down like the last days of summer for a kid in school, because I do not want to go back to COVID life without football. Football was a savior over the last 4 months to bring anything of normality into our lives. Sundays were the only normal thing that I think that we've had since March. It's the only thing that I've felt like normal again. And once that goes away, I'm like, okay, back here again.
Thursday, Sunday, Mondays, right?
Yes.
And college football, whatever it became, you still had a college football Saturday. Now it's
even that was weird though. Like,
no, I know.
Yeah, it was. We didn't start till late September, and the Big Ten didn't start till late October. It was the NFL was the constant, and once that goes away, February and March NCAA tournament going to be mixed up. It's going to be a little bit weird. So
we'll start doing podcasts about documentaries and. Just hot take theater in general, Dan.
Yeah, that sounds good. Get Mike on Twitter at SwollenDome. I'm at Dan Beyer on Fox. You can always tweet us at IWantYourFlex. Enjoy the divisional playoff rounds. Hope you have fantasy success, and we will talk to you in advance of championship weekend. Be well, everyone.